When we go to Northern Barrows, we're not just going to a landscape, we're going to a place, an environment, a habitat, which is the home of many other living creatures, and we share it with them, whether they be sheep or ponies, birds or insects or flowers. All of these creatures come together to make the place somewhere very special indeed. A couple of dozen ponies live on the burrows, and their wandering herd gives the place a sense of wildness. Even the sheep help to bring the place alive, and sometimes their mere presence can add real beauty to the landscape. And the ponies, of course, are beautiful in their own right. The sheep live their own lives, which don't seem to be particularly exciting, but when the ponies get together, they have a real sense of fun. Not only that, but sometimes they like to engage with us too, which makes them particularly appealing. If you spend any amount of time observing the sheep or the ponies, most of that time you'll be watching them feeding. Most of what grows on the burrows passes through them, and that's enormously important. The dung attracts insects, and the insects draw in the birds, and the whole ecosystem then becomes so much more varied. These curlews find the burrows to their liking and have come up from the salt marshes to probe for insects in amongst the sheep. Far more often you'll see the black and white oyster catchers and a restless, scurrying flock of starlings search energetically amongst the grasses, favouring the presence of the animals where presumably the food supply is so much greater. It's only because of the grazing activities of the sheep and ponies keeping the grass so short that a huge variety of wildflowers can exist on the burrows. And when night falls, other animals add their contribution. Of course, all life on the burrows depends on the seasons, and as winter approaches, life becomes harder for those who live there. Waders and seabirds may be able to find abundant food when conditions are right, but for the animals and birds which are land-based, it's a different story altogether. Only the excited sound of the golden plover on the mudflats echoes across the snow. Frost and snow transform the landscape and make it a different place, a place of beauty and wonder perhaps for us, but a place where food is hard to come by for those who depend on the grass. If the ground is not frozen solid under the blanket of snow, the sheep and ponies can generally find something, but for the little birds and others who have no refuge and whose food is covered up, life is very hard indeed. Little flocks of overwintering linnets will be scratching around along the shoreline to try and find a few morsels, and so will skylarks who have stayed to endure the winter. But when the snow and ice permit, it's up on the grassland of the burrows that there are more likely to be richer pickings. Up here you'll find flocks of rooks and jackdaws gathering together, all searching and probing and seeing what they can find. Although they come together in flocks in the winter, the jackdaws live together as a pair throughout the year. But having to share one small bath may strain domestic harmony. Alongside the rooks and the jackdaws, other crow species, the magpies and the carrion crow, are also busy searching for food throughout the winter. The lapwing, with their elegant crests, have come down to us from the north of the country to overwinter here in search of food. They are a red-listed species in steep national decline. These oyster catchers are far more familiar to us, most of the time spending their life on the seashore, but also coming up frequently to forage on the land as well. But it's only on the Skern that the living is good, and this is the time when huge flocks of ducks, geese and waders come to join us. On the burrows, the resident population of blackbirds is greatly boosted during the winter, and many thrushes too join in. The worms packing the well-stocked ground provide them a valuable source of food. And sometimes in the depths of winter, we see redwings flitting about as well, come to us from the far east of Europe to find food to sustain them through the winter. The landscape may be completely transformed, and ground where we would expect to see sheep grazing turn into seasonal lakes, attracting Canada geese from further up the estuary. This handsome black-headed gull is in winter plumage and is making good use of the fresh water which is so abundant on the burrows at this time of year. Meanwhile, a meadow pipit searches busily around the edges of the pools, looking for food. A skylark is still searching around on the beach, but things are about to change. The grassland now thaws out, food becomes more abundant, days become warmer, The skylarks seem to sense that spring is going to come. They start to take their higher perches, and once more the air begins to be filled with their glorious song. The blackthorn breaks into flower long before the leaves emerge. Spring is truly on the way. The ewes are normally taken away from the burrows at this time of year to give birth in safety, but this one obviously escaped the roundup. Now the birds start to take to their high perches. They want to be seen. Breeding season is approaching. Once they're big enough, the other lambs are brought back to the burrows, and this is one of the most beautiful times of the year. With the longer days come the first flowers. These include thistles and hound's tongue, an attractive flower when you look at it closely. And lower to the ground too, the grass becomes studded with flowers of many kinds. And with the flowers, the first bumblebees make their appearance. For them the thistles offer rich pickings, but pollen is sought out wherever it can be found. And the first butterflies appear, perhaps these painted ladies who have come to us after a long migration, searching out the first flowers. Even the sedges are in bloom. For a large part of the year, the little pied wagtail could be seen busily dashing and darting about. And at the other end of the scale, the slow and ponderous rooks are frequently present. But when the rooks start engaging in courting behaviour, then you know that change is in the air. The resident birds of the burrows take up their high perches and sing all day long to attract mates and proclaim territories. The normally shy wrens seem to pop up everywhere, singing as loudly as they possibly can. Blackbirds suddenly become very conspicuous. And the normally secretive dunnock pours his music into the air. robins are never shy, but are now even more keen to be seen. They keenly guard their territories, and this one is hopping mad at someone who has come too close. The skylarks are looking sleek and fit, finding plenty to eat now. And the males have developed showy crests on their heads to go with their showy songs. For many months now, the burrows will be covered by the sound of the glorious skylarks. The stonechat is never a shy bird, will always take high perches, and will always scold anyone who goes near. The handsome black-capped one is the male. These are the linnets, only a twittering song, but the males develop a lovely rosy plumage during the breeding season. All year round, the linnets are one of the most frequently seen small birds in the burrows, usually in a flock, but not during the breeding season. Day by day, the abundance and variety of the flowers increases. And everywhere living creatures become more conspicuous and abundant. This woolly bear caterpillar is the larva of the garden tiger moth. Some of the burrow's most important rare plants now come into bloom, such as this deadly poisonous henbane, or the very scarce sea stock. A huge variety of small colourful flowers is able to spring up where the grass has been closely cropped. And a beautiful population of pyramidal orchids shows itself in the protected areas of the burrows where animals can't graze. The insect life of the burrows now greatly increases in abundance. And everywhere there are predators and prey. This formidable predator is the labyrinth spider. The huge flocks of winter migrants which occupied the Skern have now returned to their breeding grounds, leaving only a small number of residents. But now a different wave of migrants comes, summer residents, attracted to the burrows by the wealth of insect life, plentiful food for them. Some of the most conspicuous of the early arrivals are the house martins and swallows who've travelled hundreds or thousands of miles up from Africa to feast on the insects here.
And these swallows are hunting along the pill, picking off the insects just above the water.
And out on the grassland, occupying the highest perches, dashing and darting about on the grass for insects, are the wheat ears, the males with their conspicuous bandit-like mask. You're far less likely to see the whitethroat, a very shy bird, who throws out a hasty scribble of a song, and as soon as anyone comes near, darts down into the undergrowth into cover. But surely the sedge warbler is the most extrovert of all the summer visitors. He bursts with eagerness to be seen and heard, and strains every fibre pouring forth his song. As the warmth increases and the abundance of flowers, more and more butterfly species make their appearance. Very often the speckled wood is one of the first native-born species we see. And on northern burrows we soon see the first common blues as well, and their numbers will build and build as the season develops. Many people think of ragwort as an unwelcome weed, but it flowers early in the year, and its many heads provide a wonderful source of food for a great variety of insects, many which depend on it. The red-coated beetles are soldier beetles. Ragwort is a staple food plant of the caterpillars of the cinnabar moth, these brightly striped ones here. The black and red cinnabar moth could easily be confused with the six-spot burnet, which is seen in huge numbers. These handsome moths just cannot be missed when it's their time of year. The reason there are so many on the burrows is the presence of the bird's foot trefoil, which is the food of their caterpillars. Once the caterpillars are mature enough, they will climb high up and find a place to turn into moths. They will weave a silky cocoon around themselves, and inside that papery cocoon the transformation will take place. The caterpillars absorb cyanide from the plants they eat, and this is passed on to the moths as well. We can think of the bright colours of a moth as a warning sign. Once the moth has fought its way out of its cocoon, its first priorities are to expand its wings and to feed and to mate. In peak season, the air will be full of hundreds of moths. All the attention of the birds is now focused on building nests and producing young. There's a thriving community of house sparrows on the burrows, and true to their name, many of them actually choose to make their nests inside the visitors centre. Before much longer, there are juvenile birds around, like these young wheatears. The male linnet here is helping to feed the youngsters. Young starlings join their flock, and gradually they lose their brown plumage and take on the speckles of the adults. Everywhere young goldfinches may be seen, lacking the red faces which they will develop within a few weeks. And from an early age, the young stonechats are just as conspicuous as their parents. The Burrows offers a wide range of flowers and vegetation, and this attracts a wide range of butterflies. The ringlet is named for the markings on the underside of its wings, but from above it can seem almost sooty black. It's mainly found in grassy areas where its caterpillars must feed. The males of the meadow brown can easily be mistaken for the ringlet, but the females have a lot more orange on the upper side of their wings. A third grassland species is the gatekeeper, similar to the meadow brown, but usually smaller and brighter. And a fourth species which thrives in the grasses of the burrows is the more unusually shaped large skipper. All of these species are only on the burrows because of the wide range of grasses there, which their caterpillars depend upon. But the caterpillars of the small tortoiseshell feed on stinging nettles. The caterpillars of the red admiral and the peacock also eat stinging nettles, but all of these butterflies in their adult form need plenty of nectar from the flowers to keep them going. Wherever there are plenty of flowers, you can expect to see plenty of butterflies on a bright sunny day. The common blue is one of the most conspicuous butterflies out on the open grassland, but all the species congregate where the food is richest. The brown argus is easily overlooked, but is a very handsome butterfly when you look at it closely.
and this is the dark green fritillary, very rarely seen on the burrows. Burnet moths and many species of butterflies congregate on the ragwort, which blooms early in the season. The multiple daisy heads of the plant provide abundant nectar as sustaining food. And the bramble, which overlaps with the ragwort, is a wonderfully attractive plant to bees and insects of all kinds. But if bumblebees have a preference, it's almost certainly for thistles, especially the handsome nodding or musk thistle, which is so striking in certain areas of the burrows. These large thistles mostly grow around the edge of the grassland, which is one of the most important habitats of the burrows. As has been mentioned, the grasslands are created and kept in order by the grazing animals. Without them, the huge variety of wild flowers would not be possible. The areas of chamomile lawn are a particular treasure on the burrows. This scented daisy grows only in sandy soils and close-cropped grassland. It is a vulnerable species classed in danger of national extinction. One habitat often overlooked is the waterways of the burrows. During the highest spring tides, the channel known as the Pill floods, and the water sometimes brings in grey mullet, which remain trapped there. Some of the smaller channels are largely of fresh water, but stickleback are present and they can live in either fresh or salt water. One of the most important habitats is, of course, the area of sand dunes, especially that protected by the fence near the visitors centre. It's here that we find the rare sea stock as well as many other important plants. Typical of this sandy ground is the buckshorn plantain, the scarlet pimpernel, the hop trefoil, the lovely little dune pansy, and water-retaining succulents such as the yellow biting stonecrop and the white stonecrop. This is the bittersweet or woody nightshade, and these pink flowers are the centaury. The sea rocket is a member of the cabbage family, not an impressive plant at first sight, but its nectar is much sought after by many insects. The more grassy areas are where we find the ragwort and the pyramidal orchid. And in this area we also find tall yarrow with their lovely multiple heads, and the tall and impressive evening primrose plants. An abundance of other creatures lives here beside flowers, but usually we can only see their tracks. Just occasionally we may be lucky enough to see one of the residents out to warm up in the sunshine. Not surprisingly, the sand dunes are a favourite hunting ground for the kestrels. In the harsh habitat very close to the sea grows the black nightshade in sprawling masses. Here too is the dwarf mallow and the henbane, which we've seen before. This poisonous plant was supposed to help witches and wizards to fly, and Dr. Crippen used it to poison his wife. This little plant is the frosted orich with its tiny flowers. And the prickly saltwort is another strand-line plant, very resilient and built to resist desiccation. In the heat of summer, the ponies no longer have the energy to gallop around. And towards the end of the breeding season, the skylarks seem happy to gather together and enjoy sand baths. But they will continue to sing for some time yet. The sheep who are lucky enough to find it rest in the shade. And water can be in very short supply, with even tiny pools visited by many clients. Butterflies continue to feed on such flowers as they can find. And it is in these long dry days that grey sands is a particularly attractive place for many creatures. This one is the scarce dune chafer beetle. The plants there are adapted to dry conditions and can be at their best at this hot time of year. This sprawling plant with the pink flowers is rest harrow, which helps hold the soil together. This is storksbill, a food plant of the brown argus caterpillar. The yellow-flowered lady's bedstraw is found in many places on the burrows, but thrives here particularly. The handsome sea bindweed is a characteristic plant of grey sands and is quite scarce nationally. And these are key plants at grey sands, the marram grass which holds the sand together, sea spurge and the sea holly. This is sea spurge. It is a succulent and, like the sea holly, very resistant to drying out. Sea holly dies away completely over winter, but when it comes up again and comes into bloom, it is a mecca for insects. This is called the black and red squash bug or cinnamon bug. Butterflies are drawn to the nectar provided by the flowers, and bees compete for nectar and pollen. Sea holly flowers late in the season, and many species of butterflies are drawn to it. The little butterfly here is the small copper, and a late generation of painted ladies is very happy to find the flowers. But mostly we are likely to see the common blue and the brown argus. The little male common blues are easily recognized. But this is a brown argus, and that can easily be confused with a female common blue, such as this. It can be very hard to tell the difference. This can easily be recognized as a female common blue from its bluish sheen, but many don't have that. Here the female and male common blues are conveniently seen together. This is hemp agrimony, a plant of damp grassland, and away from grey sands, the last refuges of flowers and insects at the end of a hot summer are the damp and shady areas surrounded by scrub. This is tufted vetch. This is a species of ichneumon wasp, very likely the one which lays its eggs inside the eggs of hoverflies. Here is St. John's wort. Eyebright. Red Bartsia. This is agrimony, completely different from hemp agrimony. But it's this mix of fleabane and watermint that is most characteristic of the damp areas. And watermint is another flower that is a particularly important food source for insects at this time of year. It's very easily recognized by its strong scent. The insect here is a hoverfly. The fleabane is a handsome yellow daisy, very conspicuous from late summer through into autumn, and here being visited by a solitary bee. Once the breeding season is over, many birds come together in large flocks, not least the noisy congregation of starlings, which are so conspicuous on the burrows. Linnets join together in large twittering flocks, very often spending a lot of time down on the grasses of the skern. Many of the goldfinches migrate, but by no means all, and quite large flocks of those remain to feed on the burrows. As long as any thistles remain in flower, they are an important food source for the last of the year's butterflies. But as they do turn to seed, goldfinches spend hours and days and weeks feeding on them, fattening up for the winter. Increasingly, the colours now are the colours of autumn. This is prime time for spiders, and cobwebs are all around. It's the season of mists and mellow fruitfulness. And where there were flowers is now a rich larder of fruit and seeds. These busy creatures are harvest men, related to spiders, but they don't weave webs, they have no fangs, and they catch their prey with claws on their feet. When we see fungi everywhere, we know that autumn has well and truly come. Any summer migrant birds who have not already left will be leaving very soon. They might include these greenfinches, because many birds gather together in flocks of the same species and all go off together. Blue tits rarely migrate. These may be only fattening up for the winter, but they are not normally seen here. The atmosphere of the burrows is subdued, although the shaggy ink-capped fungi are now spreading everywhere and in their prime. With the return of the frosts, the year has turned a full circle. Mists rise from the river, and it is now to the Skern that we must look to find thriving life. The winter migrants are here in full number and will see us through until the spring returns.